This program may contain material that is not suitable for all audiences. Parental discretion is advised.
You're listening to Straight Talk with DC Hannah. Talk radio that's strong enough for a man, but I like it too.
Welcome to this audio edition of Straight Talk with DC Hannah, coming to you live from the great outdoors in the heart of the Corona apocalypse. This evening, as the sun sets in the west on a beautiful day here in Kansas, I'm enjoying a cigar. Today's cigar is the Delirium by Diesel. This was a sample from a friend of mine in the industry, and not too damn bad. This cigar has a big chunk of Ligero. Ligero is the sun-grown leaves on the top of the plant. They carry more flavor. They also are more difficult to burn, and so they're wrapped in Seco or Volado leaf that have less flavor but burn more readily. And that's what helps contribute to the cigar's ability to burn continuously and smoothly and still deliver that great flavor. I kind of like it. I think it's a cigar that I would recommend. Medium full body, really nice, rich, earthy flavor. Warm on the nose on retrohale. Yeah, I'll see if I can track some of these down. I think this one's a keeper. Welcome to November 2020. We are now 10 months into 14 days to control the spread, to stop the spread. And Americans all over the country are facing new government-imposed restrictions because of the out-of-control COVID-19 pandemic. The number of people who are dying, it continues to go up because that number can only go up. You can't take them away. The number of people who test positive go up exponentially because the number of people being tested go up exponentially. Many people testing now because of the availability of more tests are getting tested because their employer requires it, or because they're going to travel, or just because they're scared, because they're curious, because their insurance is going to pay for it. And the numbers go up. But that number, as I've said before, is meaningless. For the most part, if you don't feel sick, you're not going to inconvenience yourself to wait in line for an hour or more to get a test that, if it comes back positive, may require you to be off work for 2 weeks. Some people are being tested because their employers require it, because they've had an exposure, because their kid went to school and some kid tested positive at school, and all the kids now are told that they've been exposed, and people are worried. And yes, in reality, some people are being tested because a family member's tested positive or a family member's been sick, and now they are being tested too. And let me add a coda to that, and that is, yes, some people are getting sick. Sinus headaches, runny noses, fevers. I have two friends who have both had manageable symptoms from the COVID. One, a man in his 70s, who recovered well after a few days with a fever, and the other, a woman, I won't dare say her age because, a man should never say such things about women, but I'll say she's considerably younger than I am, and she's older than 21. How's that? Sinus headache. The scary things that we hear on the media, that we read in the media, they're not really matching up to real life. And this is not just a matter of perspective, the limited perspective of an individual versus what the news can gather and report. In fact, it has to do with a media bias. Not a pro-Trump, not an anti-Trump media bias. This is well beyond who they wanted you to vote for 2 weeks ago. This bias is, how can CNN versus Fox, New York Times versus Washington Post, how can they grab you as a viewer and get you to follow them instead of the other guy? They are playing off public fear, much of which they helped to create. We're in a pandemic. People say, the followers, we're in a pandemic. We must sacrifice for the greater good. First of all, I object to that use of the word we. I'm not part of anybody's we. Haven't consented to it. Certainly have not consented to the restrictions on life, business, job, school, family that are being imposed. The social contract really doesn't exist. Without consent, the social contract is the unilateral imposition of tyranny. And that tyranny has taken another big step in the past 7 days. Governors in several states across the country have issued edicts banning or seriously restricting the private celebration of Thanksgiving. In the state of California, the governor has banned Thanksgiving gatherings. In the state of Pennsylvania, the governor has ordered people to wear masks in their own homes. Now, a governor's order is not law. There are laws that give governors emergency powers, but the enforcement side often must be added on later. Here in Kansas, the Johnson County Commission has issued new edicts on businesses and individuals and said, we'll write a new ordinance that will make fines against businesses. Fines against businesses if their customers refuse to wear a mask when they come in, which means that you as a customer come into my place of business, and I don't act as the unpaid agent of the state, forcing you to comply with a demand that you don't agree with on principle. I can be punished. In that place of business, I have no police powers. I can't use the force of the state to force you to comply. All I can do is damage myself by driving away a customer. All of this for a virus that has a survival rate exceeding 99% amongst all people. There are age cohorts in which the survival rate drops, but these are also the age cohorts in which survival of anything drops, including the common cold. That's right, friends. The common cold can kill you if you have pre-existing conditions. Pre-existing conditions. The medical conditions properly known as comorbidities. Medical conditions which can cause death in combination with others and make a person more likely to die of even the more minor medical conditions. Diabetes, cancer, other immune compromising conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, such as Crohn's disease, such as lupus. Every one of those things can and does kill people. And if a person catches coronavirus, they are more likely to die. Just as if they caught cancer, they're more likely to die. Just as if they catch another comorbidity, it is more likely to make them die. Long time ago, when I went to school, I learned about this concept that applies to all living things, from a virus to a blue whale. You might have heard of it. It's called survival of the fittest. In survival of the fittest, the individual organisms most likely to survive are those without comorbidity. And the flip side, those organisms that have comorbidity are less likely to survive, or, dare I say, more likely to die. That, my friends, is nature. And nature is non-negotiable. Many people believe that we are in command of nature. There are those people who believe that man can change the rotation of the earth, the heat that comes from the sun, the weather, or even bigger, the climate, that we can change it, not have an influence. Butterfly effect tells us that every living thing, every act has some effect beyond what we can see. From an economic standpoint, Bastiat's that which is seen versus that which is unseen, Austrian school economics, the idea of unintended consequence, it matches that because both of those are based on an observation of nature and an understanding of human nature. Human nature has the word nature in it. It's what we are as people. There are religions, there are philosophies, and there are laws meant to curb human nature. But in the end, nature wins and human nature wins. One part of human nature is our natural spirit of rebellion. Enjoying this cigar. Our natural spirit of rebellion. As an individual and in social groups, rebellion is a part of our nature. Rebellion is the natural outgrowth of reason and curiosity. As a kid, we think mom said X, dad said X. Why? Why X? At the age of 3, 3-year-olds say why? 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 That's our human nature. If that human nature to question authority, question established norms, established facts, question tradition, if that is nurtured into a desire to learn the answer to why, then we get positive growth and results as an individual and as a society. Nothing great was ever invented by someone who didn't ask why. Yet it seems that the majority of people don't want to ask why, perhaps anymore. Should I put any more at the end of that? The majority of people in my lifetime do not want to question authority. They don't want to question the status quo. They don't want to question the science, although the science is not really a thing. The science is a phrase used to force people to put their head down, to shut up, and to not ask so many uncomfortable questions. The science does not exist. Science exists. And science is the systematic process of questioning, of asking questions, and seeking answers. The answer is, in most cases, not the final answer. Science, in the 1700s, led people to believe that attaching leeches to their body to drain small amounts of blood had a beneficial health effect on tuberculosis, on cancer. We know today it doesn't. But today we have our own versions of leech therapy. Some of them are just plain silly. I may hurt somebody's feelings, but homeopathy and astrology are silly. And the political demands related to the COVID epidemic in the United States are silly. I've read a half dozen studies in the last week on the efficacy of masks in controlling the spread of the COVID virus. All 6 of them that I read, 3 of which said that there is no or negligible benefit, and 3 of which said there is a measurable benefit to wearing a face covering. All 6 of them were very careful to state politically correct popular views. In the case of one study, which studied over 1,000 Marine Corps recruits over a 1-month period, from the day they arrived at the Marine Corps recruit depot, half were masked and half were unmasked. They went through the life of a Marine recruit, including physical exertion, long hours with little sleep, stress, and they found that there was not a measurable difference between the the test positive rates on COVID-19 between Group A with the mask and Group B without the mask. Remember, these are guys that, as part of their training, are very physically close to each other. 16 Marines to a squad bay. That's their bedroom, basically. Physical training, running, those kind of things. Physical training that also includes hand-to-hand combat. An environment in which other forms of hygiene, sure, they get a shower every day, but other forms of hygiene can be compromised. After all, they're Marines. It's a part of the very rigorous process to turn an average Joe, a well-motivated average Joe, into a Marine. Even this study was very careful to state that the benefit or detrimental effect of mask wearing amongst other populations cannot be determined. And the efficacy of government mandates regarding masks were not addressed. So what they were saying was, we did an experiment. This is an experiment, not a statistical review. We did an experiment in which people that are under much more physical and mental stress than the average Joe and were exposed to coronavirus in the course of everyday life didn't have a measurable difference between mask and no mask. But if the government says wear a mask, you should wear a damn mask. Another study from Denmark, over 4,000 citizens of Denmark, Denmarkians, Denmarkists, oh yeah, Danes. Those people are great. I love Great Danes. For a 30-day period, half wore masks, half did not wear masks, going through ordinary everyday Danish life. Shopping in shops, riding on Danish public transit, seeing families, going to work. And they found that of the 4,000 Danes that they put masks on half and then sent them out into Denmark to live their lives. In a 30-day period, 2.1% of the people who didn't wear a mask tested positive for COVID in a 30-day period. 1.8% of the people who wore a mask tested positive for coronavirus during that 30-day period. First up, this tells me that for a bunch of people living in a fairly densely populated country in which much personal contact between other people occurs, a 2% overall infection rate in 30 days sounds pretty damn good. Second of all, that 2.1 versus 1.8%, 0.3% difference in a study of a Western European country with mass transit, with people shopping in shops, having the ordinary contact with family and friends and coworkers. 0.3% difference, to me, does not justify government mandates to wear masks and forcing businesses to be the unpaid agents of the state. Let me ask you something, and I want you to consider this carefully. If the government is willing to be this draconian for a disease process in which 2% of people in a month will test positive, and of that 2%, 99% will survive. You do the math, but there's an awful lot of zeros after the decimal point on that percentage. If the government is willing to be as draconian as it is for a disease process as minor as that, how tyrannical will they be when a real plague comes along? This is a bitch plague, my friends. It's a bitch plague. It is a disease from which 99% survive. And it's a disease at which, based on ordinary life, only 2% of a population transmit it to someone else in a 1-month period. That sounds like the kind of numbers you might want from a vaccine. Yet, that's what we're accomplishing without vaccine. Man, I'm enjoying this cigar. It's just the thing. The temperature's starting to get a little cool, warming up from the cigar and a big-ass mug of coffee. How draconian will the government be during a real plague if they act this way for the bitch pandemic? Now let's turn it just a little bit. How bad will your fellow Americans act if there's a real plague? Toilet paper shortage for the scamdemic? Think of what people will do with real supply line disruption of true essentials, of food, of medication, of fuel. Think about how close your neighbors are to savagery in the event of a real de-civilizing situation. And if the government sets real shutdowns because of a real plague, imagine it. What will that do? What will that drive people to do? Again, let's imagine. Instead of 2% infection per month with a 99% survival rate, let's say that a pathogen that truly spreads like wildfire and will infect 100% of people who come within 6 feet of each other or have physical contact with each other. 100% infection. And let's say that 1 in 5 of people who are infected die. Now that particular disease process, to my knowledge, has not existed in human history. But what if it did and civilizations just disappeared? I'm going to come back to that because I'm in the middle of the point of saying, what will happen? What will happen if a real plague comes and soldiers in real protective gear, protective masks that actually stop airborne virus? What if they are now patrolling the streets with Humvees and machine guns? What if, instead of the social disruption of not being able to have a funeral because the funeral home can't take your uncle because of coronavirus restrictions, what if it's now, if you step outside your house, you're going to get shot? Don't think that's possible? Think again. Now, what am I doing here? I am putting in perspective the overreaction on the part of mayors, governors, and the federal government, but most of all, the overreaction of people around you. Now, if you're a fan of Straight Talk, and I hope you are, you're more likely to love freedom and recognize freedom is inherently messy and dangerous. And you might even believe, as I do, that an important part of life is freedom. The freedom to choose one's own path in life, unencumbered by arbitrary restrictions and edicts of the government. Because you're smart enough to know that a politician who's elected as a result of a popularity contest isn't smart, just cunning. And you might realize that the experts at the CDC, like Blessed Anthony Fauci, St. Anthony, is a bureaucrat, not a savior. What will the government do? What will your neighbors do? And my friends, what will you do if in our lifetime there was a real deadly plague and not this bitch pandemic? Well, here in the bitch pandemic, governors are ordering the mandatory wear of masks in some states at private homes. And people accept it. When people accept it, I see how people accepted the wearing of gold stars or pink triangles on the clothing of certain people in Germany in the 1930s. Now, if you're steeped in internet culture, you think, oh no, he's invoked Godwin's law. Any argument that includes Nazis is automatically null and void. Except this time it's not. If a government can order you to wear any specific item of clothing and punish you or a business owner, if you go to their business, if you fail to wear the government mandated item of clothing, there is nothing that can keep them from isolating, tagging, and forcing any group of people from identity based on clothing. It may sound like an overgeneralization, but guess what? Your governor has forced you to wear a square of fabric on your body. Change the shape of that square of fabric, and you have a yellow six-pointed star. So how do you resist? Well, there are 4 boxes of freedom, my friend. There is the soapbox. That's where I am right now. There is the jury box. If you find yourself on a jury for someone who has been arrested, or a business owner who has been arrested for violating emergency mask mandates, and in some jurisdictions it's now written as a criminal offense, nullify the decision. Jury nullification. That's the second box. The third box is the ballot box. I don't care who you voted for in the last election. If you voted for someone who supports mandatory mask wear, you and I are on opposite sides of the political divide. Now, you and I may still be friends, but make no mistake, we're on opposite sides of a political divide. Recalls, impeachment, and when the time comes, vote those rascals out. The fourth box of freedom is the cartridge box. I'm not going to say too much more about that right now, but you know what I'm saying. Now you may ask yourself, why am I humorless today? Usually my straight talks have a pretty good shot of humor through them. I'm kind of proud of that. Well, the Kansas governor has announced statewide mask mandate and written in the order that counties must vote to opt out. The constitutionality of that has not yet been determined. I expect there will be lawsuits. Johnson County, Kansas, have instituted restrictions on businesses and individuals, and businesses can be closed. And very soon, as soon as the commission writes the ordinance and passes it through the ordinance process, be fined. States such as Pennsylvania, mask mandates even in private homes. And states such as California outright banning Thanksgiving. Now, ban Thanksgiving, and the next you get a ban on Christmas. Gavin Newsom becomes the Grinch. All the Who's down in Whoville loved Christmas a lot, except, of course, for the governor, who did not. But do you know what the governor of California did just this week? He instituted controls on restaurants, and then he had a private party that was in absolute full violation of his own order. And he got caught. He got photographed, it got published, and he issued a non-apology apology. In his non-apology apology, Gavin Newsom said, I expect more from myself. Do you know how big a pile of bullshit that is? For a person to say, I expect more from myself. He chose to violate the very order he placed on every other Californian. In Kansas, the governor's mask edict specifically excluded the legislature because the governor has no authority over that part of the state government. The legislature is exempt. They make their own rules inside the state house. The governor of California exempted himself and other state employees from the mask mandate. So it's okay until he gets caught. And then, oh, I'm sorry. I expect better of myself. Did any Californian really accept that non-apology apology? Think of what happened if that happened at home. Let's start with a simple example. Honey, you left the toilet seat up. Oh, I'm deeply sorry. I expect more from myself. Think that'd fly? No. But our political masters think that's how you make things right when you do wrong. If it's good enough for the governor of California, it's good enough for every Californian. If it's good enough for the state legislature of Kansas, it's good enough for every Kansan. And if you hold Thanksgiving and you have 11 people there and the police show up at your door, remember the magic words. Do you have a warrant? Do you have a warrant? 5 magic words. Guess what? They don't. They don't have a warrant because no judge will issue a warrant because violations of executive orders are not violations of the law. And exigent circumstances do not cover political orders. Exigent circumstances are the circumstances which can allow the police to enter your premises without a warrant. Smell of smoke, the sound of gunfire. If they can plainly observe a crime is occurring within, those are exigent circumstances. I'm confident if you host a Thanksgiving gathering and you have 11 people there, you can figure out how to not be seen from the street or the front door. I'm sure you can figure out how far away your guests need to park so that it doesn't look like they're parking at your house. I'm sure you can figure out how not to be seated so you can be seen through the plate glass window in your living room or the front door. And remember the words, do you have a warrant? The answer, of course, will be no. And then all you have to say is, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye. You've been listening to this audio edition of Straight Talk. I'm DC Hanna. Like me on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, and until next time, to my family and my friends, I love you. Stay strong. Happy Thanksgiving. Goodbye, my friends. I'm out of here.